Good evening and good morning to those of us in the US, and good evening to those of us in India, and good afternoon to everybody else who's everywhere else. Um, as we are waiting for folks to join in, hi everyone. Today's live is going to be with the wonderfully brilliant Molly Davis, and we're just going to wait for her to join in. There she is. I'm gonna try and get her out. Should have sent you a request. Woohoo! Yay! Okay, audible, visible.
Yes. Awesome.
Well, for those folks who are watching my account and from India, also from the US, please know you. This is who is behind the fantastic program called Boundary Bootcamp. It's an entire program. I'm going to ask Molly all about it, etc. But I just wanted to say, like, welcome everyone. This is a peer-to-peer chat. We're not giving you advice. We're not saying what's wrong and how to fix it. We're just speaking about these topics that is part of Molly's work, that's part of my work, and then we're just going off of the book Unashamed, because a lot of the core topics are similar between our work about shame and boundary setting. So this is Molly. This is whose work I've been doing all these years. And Molly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this.
Same here. So grateful to have you on. What would you like to tell folks about what you do, from a big picture perspective?
Ah, I'm probably best known for being a boundaries cartoonist. I always joke and say I have slightly above average artistic skills, but I love applying them to psychology and personal growth, and boundaries are my passion. My approach to boundaries is very unique, and so then I also have classes, programs, ways to work with me more closely over at boundary.com. But if somebody wants to follow me free, there's lots of good stuff on my social media.
Yeah. Thank you. So for folks who may not be, in the mental health world at all, it's the very popular viral cartoon illustration styles around boundaries that goes viral all the time. That is who we're talking to. And we're gonna, I'm sure people have seen it. Some people, sometimes some of our work can be so siloed that it can be hard to,
Yeah.
for sense outside of the silo, which actually brings me to the first question around shame, Molly.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of work around, couples, families, survivors, perpetrators of rape. I do a lot of complex trauma PTSD work. And the first thing I get when folks come to me is, this is very difficult. Like, this healing part is very difficult because boundaries are going to get me. I just don't like it. I don't like what it sounds like. It's very difficult. I don't want to disconnect. People associate boundaries
Yeah.
with disconnection automatically, specifically in this context. How hard is it in your practice? And like, how hard are people saying it is to set boundaries?
This such a good question. So we probably have a fairly similar type of personality that comes to work with us. The people who come to work with me tend to be very compassionate, very conscientious, very kind, empathic, devoted, loyal. Many of them are helping professionals in the field, therapists, doctors. Many have had trauma. They've shoved it down and they keep on keeping on, keep on helping people. And I think that as compassionate people, in a very dominant way, I know it's different in subculture to subculture, but in sort of a very dominant world culture way, I hate to say that, but the way that I experience with people all over the world,
Yeah.
compassionate people are taught, actually, I'd say this, compassionate people are given boundaries, so-called boundaries, that they have to be nice, that they have to be kind, that they're the people who keep the peace, that they don't rock the boat, that it's not okay to be angry, that we're supposed to be the nice ones that make everything work. So for example, in your situation, I'm imagining, when somebody is actually a victim of a crime, and they feel angry about it, even just feeling angry is probably not allowed. Even naming a perpetrator is probably conditioned to be not allowed, because now you're the one who's supposedly causing the problem, even though that's absolutely not true. So I think it's so much what blocks us from stepping into our true boundaries is the conditioning and the false boundaries we've been given about what is our job to be in our groups and our relationships. Do you see something similar?
I do. And I'm hearing you say that you also feel like get the first feedback, or at least the first couple of things that people will say is that I've been trained and conditioned, psychologically conditioned from my culture or my childhood or my family to be the peacekeeper, to be the empath, to be this word empath, to be the harmonizing element. So the first time that I hear someone suggest that I need to sort of speak up, or I need to say something difficult or call it out, I feel really uncomfortable. And that is exactly mirrored in my practice.
And it's actually this is sort of the message, all the free content that I give. There's a quiz on my website and the free class that comes with it. And it's literally just to do that good work in the world, to say that it's not our fault.
Okay.
That we didn't choose this. There isn't, as compassionate people, as conscientious people. Conscientiousness is great. It's very pro-social, as you know, because you work with couples, families, to care about what other people think and to realize that our actions impact them, that we are not just an individual, but we're also part of a collective, and that matters too. We need more people in the world who think like that. That is a beautiful thing. But I think that the thing is, we don't know where our boundaries are as compassionate, conscientious people.
Yeah.
We haven't been given our true boundaries. We don't know that it's okay to honor ourselves too. We've actually been taught that in order to honor others, we must abandon ourselves. In order to honor others, we must betray ourselves. And I think that's what becoming boundaried is all about, is learning how to step into, wait a minute, I can exist in such a way that I am honored and you are honored. It does not have to be both and.
That makes so much sense, and that actually hits the nail on the relational culture part, because that's how people first digest like the word boundary, as if it's a wall and someone is saying disconnect, and distance and separate instantly. But that's not what you're saying. That's not what boundary work is. Also, your illustration and artwork is really good at sort of bringing out the nuances of that, right? Like, I love that image of yours where it says a red flag doesn't always start red.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like you go into how it becomes red. It starts pink, and I think I reposted that a couple of times, many years ago.
Cool.
With people a lot, which brings me to the second question, right? Like, how do we, in today's world, extremely polarizing world, where social media has done this disservice, Molly, and you see it in the US, you see it in India so much, you see it in the Indian American, you see it in the American Indian, you see it in all these like bicultural, tricultural identities too. This idea of boundaries is sold as isolation and separation. And in my practice, I call it psychological splitting.
I so resonate. I am loving what you're saying. It drives me nuts.
It drives me nuts as well. And then we come off as like the bad ones who are saying something very horrible. But actually, I'm like, wait, I'm just saying that, just let's be holistic about this. I'm not saying go sleep with your perpetrator again. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I'm not saying put up with abuse. And I'm not saying that be very nice and harmonious, right? But I am saying like psychological flexibility is a healthy thing, just like empathy is a healthy thing, but it cannot be suicidal. It cannot be at my cost.
Yes.
Right?
My bones are going, oh. I think we have been taught, actually, first of all, just let me say, I'm just really happy that the conversation about boundaries is out there. And I know that each person really doing boundaries work is coming at it from their own angle, and they are a right fit for somebody. What they're saying is a right fit for somebody. I feel like I'm in competition with nobody. I love that this stuff is out there in the world. But for me, and that's probably why I connect with you so much, and I don't even know how long I've been following you, but as long as I know, as soon as I saw you, I was like, ooh, I love her. Yes. And this is probably so much of why it's, we, in order, humans can be such pendulum swingers.
Yeah.
Where in order to correct the absolute lack of boundaries at all, we swing over to the other side in a desire to correct, but what we end up doing when we polarize,
Yes.
we polarize from one extreme to the other, we now create a whole new set of problems. So yes, we have now solved the problem by polarizing to the F you, my needs are the only ones that matter, I'm cutting you off if I don't like you at all. And again, sometimes there is a time and place for that, but it's about 1% of the time.
Right.
Because there's people out there now teaching this as a general practice, and it should only be used in extreme situations.
Exactly.
And so now we have solved this problem of never being able to say no, but now all we say is no. And now we've solved this problem of never thinking about ourselves, but now all we think about is ourselves. And we now have a different set of consequences of that. We're very, very lonely. Humans are herd animals. I'm an Alaskan, so I always think of us like caribou. Like we're not solitaries.
No.
Our actual physical health is impacted by our connections. We need connections. And this anti-connective, anti-relational approach to boundaries is harming us in a whole different, I believe that research will show the harm that is done it's just going to take 20 or 30 years, unfortunately. And we have to find that middle way. And that's I kept thinking as a therapist, I kept like, oh man, somebody needs to make a class about this. Oh man, somebody needs to make a class about this. And that's actually why I ended up developing a program about it, because I'm like, this needs to be in the world. It's huge. It's undergirding so many of our problems. We have to have an honor self, honor other way of walking in this world, which is love.
You hit on so many, actually, multiple layers of the conversation, Molly, and I'll take it forward, maybe, if with your consent, is that you hit, of course, on the interpersonal, you hit on the familial, but what you're also hitting is the geopolitical, that it's not just such a small thing about like, oh, I just need to be nice and I need to be more like harmonious. And sometimes people will hear what we just said as that, oh, you're asking me to be compassionate, but I'm already compassionate. I've done it for 40 years of my life. Now I'm done with that. And it's like, yes, that makes a lot of sense, but that actually doesn't get to the core of like, what is your rage about? What do you need from someone for them to do something differently, or for you to show up differently in that situation? I'm not sure the message is going out there, which also then, percolates into the school system, the college system, the university, the teaching, the bosses, the workplace. It has so many consequences, actually. And that's why psychological flexibility, I think, is at an all-time low. I see it. And thank you so much for saying in that way. Like, I didn't think about it like that before you said it. We all we say now is no, or we say much more of like a no. Yeah, that's so true. We do, actually.
Yeah. I actually teach something inside my boot camp. I teach a pro relational boundary setting, that there's actually this thing called a boundary conversation. Instead of, because so many times boundaries are trying to like, now tell your partner this, here's my boundary, boom, you have to do it or you're bad. And I saw it in marriage therapy. I saw it everywhere. Or I saw it with a family member, and like, wait, there's a conversation that needs to be had in any healthy or healthy-ish relationship, not in an abusive relationship, but in any sort of healthy-ish relationship. Here's what I need, and there has to be a conversation about how the relationship can make that work. In what ways is someone going to compromise? In what ways does it go too far? It's, humans like really simple things. Sometimes I think it's one of our fatal flaws is give me the easy. And I think as Americans, I can't speak for anyone else, but as Americans, we're sort of trained to think in terms of like fast food tips for personal growth. So, I'm setting a boundary, and I'm just going to say no, and I'm just going to do this. And it's like this, it's going to be more nuanced. There's more subtle layers, but I'm promising you, it's easier than you think. And once you discover it, you can begin doing it effortlessly in numerous contexts. One thing that you said, I know when I came into, I mean, for me, boundaries work was revolutionary. It was personal transformation before it ever became something I did with as a therapist, and then before I ever built it as a class. It was my own
Right.
absolute revolution on the inside. And I remember when I began seeing I always call it the tectonic plates of boundaries, the true, like, what supports human health at the ground, under the ground level. And then I remember when I realized the micro is the macro. These truths, honor self, honor others, are actually the truths that healthy systems would be built on. Our systems aren't so healthy. These things would be the thing, honor self, honor others is how groups should be built that were healthy. That group is super toxic. I began seeing the healthy systems and the unhealthy systems, and we have so many things, I think, again, speaking in the United States at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's broken systems built on broken systems built on broken systems, and there's a lot of good people in the gaps attempting to help, attempting to mend, attempting to put band-aids on, but our systems a lot of times are built on flawed boundaries on warped toxic boundaries in the first place. So no wonder they don't work.
Exactly. And then and because the US has so much power and American systems have so much power, then they infiltrate into other relational cultures like in Indian culture, which is, urbanized and English, and I'm very much part of it. I'm Americanized myself. I spent a lot of time in the US, I've spent a lot of time in India, and we can often just copy and then like come back into these relational cultures and be like, okay, now this is the new way to do it, like boundaries. Everyone has got boundaries, and boundaries need to look this way. And if you don't, you're too compassionate and you're a piece of shit. Like, to be very blunt about it. Or, like, forget it. It's very American. This other extreme. Like, it's completely westernized. So anything westernized is anti-India or anti-relational, which it's also not. There are nuances.
Pendulum, right? I think sometimes I can only speak to what I know. One of the things I think a lot about, and I don't quite have my thoughts fully formed here, but it is very much a macro boundaries thought, is that we have a dominant world flavor, and it is not everywhere, but the power structures are very much coming from a might makes right ethos.
Yes.
And so, whoever has power sets the boundaries for everybody else. Here's what you're allowed to be. Here's how you're allowed to be it. Here's, if you're even allowed to live, here's how you're allowed to live. And it's been that way for a long time. And a lot of amazing humans have been crushed under it. And a lot of other amazing humans must find a way to live in it and not get eaten. And I think that's a big part of, I know you work with trauma too, coming from some trauma therapist background as well.
Right.
I think there's a fascinating level of generational trauma that exists in humans just simply from having to survive in this machine. And then you add in cultural heritage, all these other horrific traumas, add that into that, depending on where it's relevant and how it's relevant. But it's almost like sometimes I think this comes in, again, back to your very first question about why are boundaries so hard. I think for many compassionate people, for many kind, conscientious people, it's kind of in our bone marrow. Do not rock the boat. Do you know how you need to survive in a might makes right world? It's called don't draw attention. Play by the rules. Keep the peace. You can actually thrive a little bit in your little box if you do, It's very hard for us to step into our power when we have loads of survival programming in us going, probably a terrible idea. It's really, the first time I wrote a cartoon and put it online, this is silly, but it's an example of how this works.
Yeah.
Done a ton of my own interpersonal work, living this stuff to the best of my ability. I truly believe this. It's not just something I say, I seek to live this. And I've had this urge to put cartoons online. I always cartoon on everything, but I just wanted to put them online. And I couldn't do it. I literally probably 4 or 5 years, I don't even know how long, I just was like, hell no. Right. Do you know what they do to people online? Have you seen what happens? when someone doesn't like what you say online, it's a bad, no. And I finally actually felt like I'd be almost disobedient to my bones not to. It was such a strong sense of I am supposed to do this. So I finally just started making terrible cartoons, posted them online, and went, you know what, screw it, I'm doing it, and I'll just it'll whatever happens, yeah. But that first one, actually the first batch of them, I literally sweated. I was up and I had a full-on fight flight response from putting myself out there. And I remember thinking, man, I thought I did a lot of trauma. Where is this coming from? And I truly believe it came from generations and generations of programming. Do not step onto a platform that is, that goes outside of your little community. Do not. It's a terrible idea. You can't make, you won't make it. This is how you die. And it wasn't logical, but then when I thought about generational trauma, I thought, yes, it is. It's very logical.
Thank you so much for explaining that with so much nuance. And actually, you touched on so many things about why I also resonated with your work so much, just intuitively, because it's not just me. There's a lot of people teaching from me. This is what happened to me, and here's my face on it, which is okay. That's their practice. This is very practical. You're actually helping get into someone else's shoes, breaking it down for them, choosing many different lenses, the lens of a date, the lens of a family, the lens of just really doing public service. I'm just so glad that you actually listened to your intuitive voice and showed up, because it's such a gift, but two, it models courage, and it models an anti-shaming sort of inner work practice, which is the healing part of the intergenerational trauma. Because in India, we may not have a similar system as the US, because it's an ancient country. There's all these other things, it's not hyper capitalized as of now, but we do have generations of relational, dissociated adults. And so what happens is young people who will sort of be a little bit Americanized will come with all this inner work language and will expect the elders of their family to get it at that level. And I have to be like, you're not thinking like them. You're thinking like yourself. So they're not going to understand your boundaries if they're not communicated in a way that someone gets it, which is where culture comes in, and relationship comes in, language comes in. India has so many languages. Every district is a different food style, smells. Everything is so diverse here that cannot be one size fit all, which then brings me to why I wrote Unashamed, Molly. It is for this reason, of course for a global Indian, of course for an Indian framework, but to also bring in relationality in there. So I divide it into 4 parts. Thank you. And I go into healing, listening, deepening, and then release.
So cool.
Thank you. And it's really for this reason, let's make it practical, which brings me to the third question, right? So much of it can be so abstract. And of course, I'm trained as an art therapist, which is also why I gravitate towards your illustration style so much. What is the benefit of being a practical thinker in this realm for you?
Oh, so much good stuff there. I think, first of all, I have such a connection with you about that, and I love how you're bringing it into India and my work in my work here in the U.S. Though the program is totally international now. But when I was a therapist,
people downloaded a lot.
As a therapist, it was U.S., and I found that it was that same. This is where the macro is the micro. So in the micro, we have a lot of our nuances and the individual and differences in our small area. But the principles, what I find is when you get into the deep tectonic plates of boundaries, such as what does shame do? What does fear do? What does honor look like?
Yes.
It's kind of the same everywhere. It's so good for humans. It resonates so much. And then the nuances can look different from context to context. And it was that same thing that I found, was that it's, hold up, this is the downside of meme culture. The upside of meme culture, for example, is that now people know what a narcissist is. Do you know how many lives that's probably saved? It's amazing. Then the downside is, as the pendulum swings, now everybody who has an ex dated a narcissist. Literally everybody's ex is a narcissist. And by the way, your ex is calling you a narcissist too. Because, now it's like, oh, they're this. We are over applying the label, so the pendulum swings. And it's so for example, in your case, somebody who's really coming into some new awarenesses about themselves then might label the parents as not caring, as choosing to be willfully ignorant. No, they have different wisdom and they are thinking in a different way. So before we apply the negative labels and make these assumptions, which then shapes how we treat people, hold up, that's actually a boundaries violation to assume the motivation, to assume the way somebody is conceiving things, to assume it. That's a boundaries violation. We're the ones violating the boundaries, even as we demand our boundaries be respected. And the same thing here. It's a hold up until you know that somebody is actually cunningly abusive. It's probably best to assume they're not. They just don't get it the way they don't see it the way you're seeing it. How about have a conversation and find out what's going on? When we come at it with honor and mutual respect, there's this, I believe humans have intrinsic worth. And so when we see the boundaries of human worth, we naturally must treat others with honor. It's non-negotiable. Treating somebody with honor is non-negotiable. And it's non-negotiable to accept the same, or to expect the same for ourselves. And from that place, we can have all sorts of great conversations. But anyways, I got sidetracked. What was your question?
No, that makes so much sense because I was asking about practicality, and you actually labeled exactly how you make it more practical by going into like the depth of it and saying the tectonic plates are universal because we are one species. We are not like 500 million different like species. We're one species with incredible amounts of diversity, which is your point, and I think it reflects in your work so much, which is why I love it, that it's not based on you as a person, but on like the work that you have done from your character, from your inner work, from the honor and the integrity of your life. The other thing is you're not oversharing on your page and your account also, which I see often happens, which is I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm saying there's a real problem in like social media culture around this work, is that many people speak about like very deep things to their audiences and just drop it there and then say, well, don't overshare. Well, boundaries should look like this. And like, this is what happened to me at this age. And every post is about that. And it's like they're a therapist or they're like a coach, etc. And I wonder, like, you're already modeling a very different version of boundaries by doing that, and so the work becomes all about that person versus the practicality that these are tools. Now how someone else is going to listen to Molly and Neha speaking is up to them, because we're not like, we're offering the tools of our practice. Now it's also an honor, and like it's respecting their boundaries, that they're not infants, they're adults who are listening to this conversation. They can pick up what they need to, and if they don't like it, they may give us feedback, we may take the feedback, up to us. So it's so meta in that way, which is why I so appreciate the practicality. And
I never thought about that. That's really good stuff. Sometimes I feel like I was leading a workshop the other day, and I mentioned very briefly that I had young adult children, and one of the gals in the workshop was like, well, now I'm actually interested in working with you. I had no idea you were a parent. And I was like, I really probably need to share a little bit more, but I'm very similar to you in that, I think that some people do need to follow a person. That's where they're at. And so I think that there's probably a healthy function for everything. For me, I know that when somebody talks to me in person, sometimes, people think that having social media followers makes you special, and it doesn't. But sometimes people are like, I can't believe I'm talking to you. And I just want to say, like, man, I roll up my sleeves and wash the dishes like everybody else. I'm just a person doing my work in the world. And what I want to do is help set you free so that then you can do your work in the world. We are a team. And this is my zone of genius. So I love sharing this. This is what I'm here to do. But we are all just exactly as you said, we are the humans. We
Yeah.
are peers on this journey, and you have something also I'd love to help you unlock it. And it's nice to think of I I I bet yours might be very similar. I always think of myself as a midwife
Yes, a
in
channel.
the invisible realm. Yes, and what I'm doing, you think about a midwife. What does a midwife do? They're there if something goes wrong, but they're there to assist a very natural process that that person is incredibly capable of doing, unless something goes wonky. And I'm helping people birth themselves.
Yes.
So who gets the glory of that? The
Them.
person, the person birthing themselves,
That.
and that's beautiful, and that keeps it in place. Your ego can't get wild when you're a midwife. Your ego can get wild when you think you're the shit. And,
Yes.
yeah.
This hits on shame exactly, right? And I mean, exactly, I resonate so much because when your ego is in check like that, then shame doesn't impact you to that level of like debilitation. Like you because you can see it's not about me. If someone misunderstands me, if someone thinks I'm too much of a black sheep and I'm rocking too much of the boat, that's their projection
Yeah.
also, and I can also honor that. And like, of course, it hurts or
Yeah.
it pains, etc. But I can honor that, which is why I go into exercises, and I've made it very like a workbook style. And I'm hoping that from this conversation, folks go to your account, look at the practical tools that you
Oh,
have,
thanks.
apply it to the practical tools I have. It's literally a program between you and me. This like it's an entire program like that is offered without any cost. Really speaking.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Because it seems like you are in your zone of genius in this. I've been thinking a lot about zone of excellence versus zone of genius, and just kind of really turning that around in my head and thinking, as the more I come into
Yeah.
myself and live from this true, my core,
Right.
this, and walk in love, and always a process of coming back home to oneself. But the more I do it, the more clarity I have about what I'm here to do. It's been so fascinating to watch it rise up within me and want to come forth. And the more, and so, yes, it's not fun to have people, somebody always hates you on social media. If you're out there, somebody's literally always going to hate you. And it's just how it is.
Yeah.
But if it's a lot easier when you're walking your truth than versus when you're trying to do it from a place of ego, you know. But I have a sense from you that this book came from like it just came from a very deep place where it almost had to be written. It was yours to write and yours to put out there in the world. If you don't mind me asking you a question.
Oh no, I love that. I could cry because it's just such a beautiful and deep question. And not many people ask that question because I think others are in their own path, and it's hard to find resonance of this kind. So it's so
Yeah.
lovely when you shared that. I so deeply resonate with the question itself because that's exactly how I wrote it. I had no personal desire to be an author. That was not my personal aspiration. It was something else. I plan. Yeah, my aspirations are different. But when the call for a book like this came, I was already doing the work. I'd already written all the stuff already. Like it wasn't like I had to write it all
Wow.
over because I was every up in the morning doing my journal. Everything was in it, and I was making sense. I was between the US and India. Everything in the US wasn't making sense to me. Everything in India wasn't making sense to me. There was a bridge that had to come in, and I was like, why is the culture against this bridge? Like, why is it getting so polarized? And why? And in fact, I'm very much like a shadow worker, so I like when something is not working because it gives me feedback about what's being hidden and repressed.
Ooh.
I'm a dark night flame.
Oh, so cool.
I love that. So I was like, oh, people are hating something about this. Let me look at this deeply. And I was like, oh, there's shame in the culture. People are really shaming each other. They're shaming themselves.
Yeah.
What's going on? And to do with sex and to do with courage. So it just kind of came together. And in fact, it's very guided by some of my spiritual guides in the astral realm, which I also talk about a little bit in the book, but I don't go super into it. Thank you for seeing.
It's so cool. No, it's interesting to me too, because when I finally, I'd say obeyed almost. I know it's such a strong word, but it was like this
Yeah,
class that had to be made. And it just,
exactly.
when I finally just did it, it was so fascinating to me because in a half hour, I wrote out exactly what I do, exactly how I do it, exactly where it was all there.
It's all there.
It just needed to be put together. And there's work involved then in the logistics. Like, how the hell do you do an online class? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I have
No, I
a
love obey.
cartoon.
I love the word obey because it is surrender. You only obey. It's not like a dominating, like authoritarian obey or punishment. It's like divinity is surrender. Your own intuition, you have to surrender to it. It's
Yep.
grace.
It is actually, and I work with a number of different people. So some are spiritual, some are not. Some is more existential, more philosophical. But it very much, I think, spiritual terms feel right in expressing that there is like I can't lay my head on my pillow at night and sleep with a sense of self-respect and dignity if I do not do what my very bones have begun crying out to do. It's a really weird feeling when it hits you, and I think that it even, to me, it really drives my passion to work with compassionate people because
Mm,
I I I mean I believe that we are actually at critical mass in this world already. There's already enough compassionate people to literally change the world, but most of us we're so disempowered. We have been taught to keep the people pleased. We've been taught to honor others at the cost of ourselves. We practice self-abandonment as a way of life, and we call it niceness. Again, often from what our survival level ancestors taught us and what we are conditioned to believe. We're not doing it on purpose.
no,
But
no.
what would happen if we all started waking up and stepping into our power, and then that beautiful thing we're here to do could bloom within us, and we set out to do it? It literally gives me chills. Like, what would happen if there's more of you in this world? What would happen if those ones woke up? What would happen if the other people called to do what I'm doing wake up? What would happen? What would happen? It's kind of wild. And so your book seems like it's doing that same work, reaching out to the people who are so disempowered and saying, "Hey, wake up. There is a different way. It's possible.
Yeah,
Let me help you conceptualize what this can look like and how it can functionally, happen in real life."
yeah,
It's so
yeah.
exciting to be part of what I consider to be a great team all around the world of healers and shifters as we're shifting into this whole new way of being human.
Man, this intuition was so right to, like, I was like, we will align because exactly, Molly, exactly what you're saying. There is such, we're at a crossroads. Many healers, I think, are being called to do some work, I think, in their own realms. We all do different work, but at some level, we're gonna be like, I think the call is just becoming louder as
Yeah.
polarization is getting more intense, and wars are just like the norm now in this decade, is what I hear from my gurus and teachers, astral
Yeah.
ones, etc., etc. And it's interesting to hear you say, like, just to hear you name and wrap up the book in such a beautiful, like, spiritual form. And I really hope it reaches people who are interested in that spirituality, who are even wanting to maybe access it, but they don't know how. I think you've made it very practical too. And I'll say one last thing about it. It's also for people who may be narcissistic, because I've also written a lot about that. There's also
Yeah.
shame that also stems from looking at myself as superior, also comes from shame.
100%.
It's just a different, it's just a different pathology, I guess, in my language, in clinical language, or less spiritual language. But in spiritual language, it would be maybe it's a different, like, orientation, I guess. I don't know.
I think shame and grandiosity are two sides of the same coin. It comes from only one person can get honored and the other person can't. And shame simply says the person who does not get honored is me, and grandiosity says the person who doesn't get honored is you. But at a deep fundamental tectonic plate level, it's the same exact boundary problem.
That was such a beautiful way to bring this entire conversation to a close, to a pause, at least for now. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot, but
So
I know
Oh,
I took
fun.
more of your time than I asked. I'm so sorry.
No, I love chatting with you. It's kind of funny that we've never actually talked before because it was just so like, oh yeah,
It is.
pour another glass of tea and holy smokes, there's so much there. So I love it. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Molly. I mean, I think we'll be in conversation more, and folks, like, I'm planning to bring Molly over if she would come for like a larger teaching
Yeah.
seminar like series. And so I know folks are very interested in this and wanting. They've been asking more shared teaching spaces. So I'm going to do one. We'll do it online when I'm in the US. Maybe do it in person. If you're in India, let's do it in person. I
I'll
don't know. Please,
I'll get my ticket now. Done.
please, please.
Say no more. Can't wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any last words around like how people can find you, anything you want them to know about your practice, anything?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I'm at Boundaried Bootcamp on Instagram. On Facebook, my page there is actually Becoming Boundaried,
Okay.
which I wish was the name of my Instagram account, but I didn't think of it in time when I was like, I don't know, what should I do? I'll just do this.
I
And
love
my
bootcamp though.
website,
It works for me.
okay, good. My website is boundaried.com. It's boundaried with a D. And so there are ways to come work with me more closely, but there is a quiz there for compassionate people that just gives it really gives a bunch of free stuff. So if somebody does not have any money and just wants some help with boundaries, follow one of my pages, whether Facebook or Instagram. Go take the quiz. You'll get a free assessment. You get access to a free class, and then you'll be on my email newsletter. And it's my heart is that everybody needs this, and so I give away a ton of stuff for free. And then for those who really want to get into some deeper work, come on in. It's been life changing. It's been life changing for me and life changing for so many clients.
It's so evident that you live your talk. I have so much respect for what you do, and for you,
Same.
very rare. Like and just please, I'm not again not throwing shade on anyone else. Just trying to give you a compliment. Like it's so
Oh, thanks. That's
authentic.
the best compliment ever, actually. So thank you. I guess goodbye.
Goodbye. See you.
So
Okay, bye everyone. Sorry we couldn't take questions this time. See you soon. Okay, bye.